Go. So we're recording now, just so you know. So today we're going to be talking about our coppers and reds. When you look at our color chart, there is a lot of warmer tones on there. There's a lot of coppers and golds. You've got your copper, your double coppers through to your mahoganies, and then obviously into your reds, and then a cool red, and then obviously extending into your violets as well. I have heard while I'm talking to other people doing Zoom sessions that sometimes they get a little bit baffled of which one to choose and why to choose it. So we're going to break that down. So what we'll cover today will be the color pigments of the coppers and reds and mahogany and where they actually sit, achieving an orange copper, understanding the double red shade and what that means, having double pigment. And then ways of pushing our coppers and reds to maximize their vibrancy. So we'll get started. Is there any specific questions that anyone wants to ask on our coppers and reds, just so I make sure that I cover it during the discussion today? Does anyone have a question, a direct question? No, before I get going. Do you do a lot of coppers and reds in the salon? Yep. 290, Jackie's 50-50, yep. This is good then. So this information will be good for you to know. So basically, before we go through, obviously the numbering system, sometimes when we've come from other salons using other brands, or that you've changed over from another brand, the numbering systems can be a little bit different. So I'll just go over what they are. So obviously we have, in our coppers, we have a 0.34. When we see a point and then the first number afterwards, in this case, it's a 4, and then we have a 3 after that, our primary pigment in that is a 4, meaning copper. And he sits at about 60% of our mix, okay? Secondary pigment is a gold, and he'll sit at about 40% of our mix. So it's really important that we know that information when we're going to use a color, especially on different bases, or if we're coloring back, just to know exactly what's going into the hair. So we're not disappointed with the end result because we thought it might have been a little bit more copper or a little bit more gold, just so we know those percentages. So it's always a 60-40 split. Unless you turn to the back page on the color chart where you have our pre-mixed chocolates, they're always, for an example, you've got, 435 and 535, they're always a 50-50 split, okay? But in all the other range, it's always 61st, 42nd. So then we have our copper golds, which is one I just showed you. So that's 4.3, your 0.4 is just a straight copper reflect. Then we have a double 4, which is a double copper reflect. And then we have a 4.6, which would be 60% copper, 40% red. So there's our copper red reflex. I think the other thing that's really important is we need to know where they sit on the color chart. So I'll explain this, but if you've got a color chart there, you feel free to open it up and have a look. So on the back of the color chart, you'll have our round circle color wheel. That is an indication of where our colors sit with their tonal value, except for the ashes, because they're not green based. So I don't know why they've pushed them around that little bit further, but because we're not talking about that today, I won't go into it. But if we're looking on that chart and we have a look and see where our 3-4 sit, they're obviously away from the gold and more into the copper. And then our 4-3s are still into that kind of coppery gold look. And then you'll notice that your 4s are right actually in the middle of your orange. And then your double 4s are closer to the red, okay? So that's actually telling you straight away that our coppers are a red-based copper, okay? So they're not a true orange. They do have red in them. So when you've got a double 4 and you're looking at it going, oh, I want a really intense orange, what you're actually putting in is more orange-red, okay? So that's really important to know. The benefit of this is that when your oranges fade traditionally, sometimes they can look a bit wishy-washy and get a little yellow, okay? When Oway coppers fade, because of that red or the orange-red pigment that's in them, they don't look wishy-washy when they lighten out. They will lighten out, but they're not going to look like a faded wishy-washy copper. And I love that. You just got to understand that there is that little bit of red in there, and that's what stops it from doing it. So that is pretty much how our coppers sit on the wheel. Just got to remember that they've got that little bit of red in them, okay? Your next color on the wheel is, or your color pigment, sorry, is your mahogany. Does anyone do a lot of mahoganies in the salon? Or use mahogany much? No. I was the same as you, Phoebe. I never really did that many mahoganies. I think mahogany to me is a bit of a, what is that color? It's not brown, it's not red, it's not pretty much of anything really. Mahogany is your 0.5 pigment. So basically, he's a straight mahogany color. And then you've got your 5/6s. So you've got 60% mahogany and 40% red. So what is a mahogany color? Okay. So basically it's one of the darker shades of red that we've got. It's packed full of brown, auburn, and red pigments. Okay. So you've got a combination of everything. So what I like about that fact is that if you had a client come into the salon, and where I now start to use a little bit more of mahoganies, is if they could just be a client that has a chocolate brown, like a 5/3, and they want that little bit more warmth in it, but they look at the reds and the coppers and they're way too bright for them. So that's where your mahogany comes in as your color that you can add into that. So you could do 5.0, 5.3 as a combination, and 5.5, a third and a third and a third. So what you're doing is you're giving a little bit of reddish brown or auburn brown to your color mix without sending them too red. Okay, so it's perfect for the client that wants to warm up their brown, or if a client that looks at the reds and goes, you know what, I wish I was brave enough to go 5.6. I love it, but I'm just not there yet. That's when you can go in with 5.56 or mix half 5/6 and half 5/6 together. So you can use them to dilute your reds down without taking away all of the warmth. Okay, so they're a really good tool to use to warm up a natural or tone down a bright color, or use them on their own. She could go in straight with a 5/5/6. If she's on a level 5, her hair's going to have red orange in it anyway, so you're going to get a really nice reflect, but you're not going to get red hair. She's going to have a really rich red brown as opposed to red. So I've started using them a little bit more than what I thought that I ever would. Also to the mahogany pigment, when you look at it, it's not really warm or cool. Sometimes, you know, the redder ones look slightly cooler than the coppery auburns. So if I put a mahogany on the color wheel as I do beige as a blonde, okay? You're not an ash blonde, you're not a yellow blonde, you're a beige blonde. So beige blondes kind of sit in the middle because they've got a gold and a violet and an ash pigment mixed together. I think your mahogany is a really beautiful color because it pretty much suits most skin types. That can pull off like a darker color. So if you've got a client that you think that putting the 5 red is going to make their skin look a bit flushed and pink, but they don't really like orange as their pigment, a mahogany is a perfect color because you've got a combination of both. You've got your auburn and your red tones in there. So for me, it's a bit of a skin hybrid color. It can go pretty much on anyone that can suit that level of color. Does that make sense with the mahoganies? Does anyone have any questions about that? No. We just got to still be aware that when we're putting any sort of color, irrespective of it being, you look at the mahoganies compared to the reds, if you're putting it on a 5, you're going to get some natural pigment come through as well. So just be aware that that's going to increase the warmth of that. So if they're after a true sort of 5.5 color and you're on a level 5, you probably want to put a little bit of base in with it, or even a dash of ash in it, just to counteract her own warmth coming through, just to give you a true mahogany level. Moving on to the reds on our color chart. Obviously they're at 0.6. So we have 0.6 is our base. And then our 6/6 is your 6/6 double red. The red pigment I love in Oway because it's a true blood red pigment. When this fades, you don't have any orange undertone. And I love that. When you get if you want a red orange, we have the 5/6s in the mahogany, which can warm that up. But you can also, if you want a copper red, you can mix your red and your coppers together to get that. Still use that same ratio of 60/40 if you want a copper copper red and you're working on a level 5, you would put 60%, 5.4 and 40%, 5.6, and that's going to give you a copper red. Flip them around the other way and you get a red copper. Okay, so make sure that you're using that kind of split the same way. But they're not orange based at all. So I've done a couple of reds on some clients and I've seen them, 6-7 weeks later, and yes, their red softened off, but it doesn't look orangey, which is really good. The pigment tone in them, the 0.6s, when you look at the chart, are quite red. So your 4.6, 5.6 and 7.6. We don't make a 6.6. However, mixing half 5 and half 6 together will give you that 6. The 6 they do make, which we'll talk about him later, he's a bit of a lone ranger underneath. But making the red, the single red tone is actually quite red on its own. Adding double red, the best way to explain it is if you were wearing a white shirt and we're out one night and I came along and I stumbled and spilt my glass of red wine all over your shirt, it's going to go red, yeah? 20 minutes later, it dries off. I've had a few more to drink and I've come back and I've tripped and I spill another one on top of you, right? God forbid that I'm not kicked out before that happened, but it would go red again. It won't go brighter. It would actually go deeper, okay? So red on red goes deeper, okay? So our 0.66s are actually, they're intense, but you've got to go lighter to get that intensity. So in a lot of other brands, 6.66 actually looks more like our 7.6, okay? But our 6.66 compared to that is actually quite dark, okay? The only way I can explain this is in Italy, where the color's from, they have a lot of women with a lot of dark hair, okay? And they probably want a really dark, vibrant, rich red, and that's where they're putting that double pigment into it. So what Oway have done, they've gone as light as an 8. So our 8.66 is going to give you double red pigment. So that's our lightest and brightest color. It will perform on level more like an 866 would in traditional ranges, okay? So you've got that intensity, the brightness. 7.6 is beautiful on its own, okay? So you don't think you need to go up a level just to get the brightness. 6.6 on its own is beautiful. Mixing 7.6, sorry, and 866 together is really stunning as well. I think I said 6.6, I meant 7.6 on its own is beautiful. So just remember that doubling the red pigment will only give you a brighter, more intense color when you go lighter with the level. Okay, so use your color swatch book there too, and that'll show you a true indication of how much red or how much depth you're going to get out of that. They are beautiful, your darker, intense reds, but they're designed to give a really beautiful reflect on darker hair. Okay, so if Jackie came in and she wanted a really dark red, and I used 4.6, it'd be nice, but I'd be better off using 5.66. Okay, it's going to come out like a level 4 or 4.5, but she's going to get more red through that pigment. Then we do come down to our 6 level red. He's our little loner, call him the Lone Ranger. He's 6.62. He's a really beautiful color, but when you look at him compared to his big brother, he's cooler, okay? It's almost got like a little soft violet tone to it. So 662 is your red pigment, but it's got 40% of a pearl or iridescent, some ranges call it. I think a pearl pigment is in between an ash and a violet. So it's just a really soft aftertone just to cool the pink down in your red. So if you've got a client that you know loves a red but wants a cool red, that's where your 6.62 comes into it. You can mix him in with the others as well. You might think, oh, 7.6 is really beautiful, but I just want to tweak the edge of it and just cool the top of it down. Then you'd mix half and half together. So 662, I love using that color. It's really, really nice. It's really good to use on clients that want to go red that are quite pale and have that cooler skin tone, because it's almost got that violet overtone in it. So the red won't flush their skin too much. Does anyone have any questions on that? The pigments? No? So next is how we go about formulating to achieve a true orange. Okay, so we all know that our oranges have a red, an orange red background in them. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are mixing a little bit of gold pigment in with our oranges. So if you get a client sitting in the chair and she shows you a picture of someone's hair, and I'll use the swatch for an example so you can see, and it is that color, like it's a real orange. If you put 843 on her hair, it is going to be a little redder than that, okay? Now, there's two things you can do. The first thing is you've got to remember is all I need to do is add a little bit of gold, okay? And the gold dilutes the red in it, and then the orange kicks in and you get a true orange pigment. It's really beautiful. So we have the red in it to stop our oranges from fading out and looking yucky, but then obviously this is what we have to do. So if you mix half 834 and half 843 together, it's amazing, okay? So the three that you're putting in, that 60% of 3 in the 834 will go in and it'll fight a little bit. You've still got gold in your 843 as well, and you've still got copper in your 834. So you end up getting a really beautiful true orange pigment. So I've tested this in a few different swatches. I've tested it mixing, say, 7.4 and 10.33 together, okay, to see what would happen. And you get a really beautiful kind of level 8.5 true orange pigment, okay? It's really stunning. So always kind of think, the only thing I would suggest is when you're looking at around about a 6 level with your coppers, 634 is quite dark, okay? So I would probably only put a little bit of 634 in with my 643 and maybe add a bit of gold concentrate, okay, on top of your mix. And that gold concentrate will dilute the red. So what you could do, for an example, you could do 843, 40 grams, and you could add 10 grams of your 0.3 concentrate, and that's going to dilute the red down and give you more of an orange copper. If you say you ran out of 834 and didn't have any, okay? So you can use your gold concentrate to do the same. And I've tested and swatched them all and that it works beautifully. However, 843 on its own is a really beautiful color. It's just going to come out a little bit tiny bit more red in it. So we did a color the other day and I actually did a 746 and a 744. So 744 has got more red in it. Then I'm actually doing a 746. The girl, she said to me, it's one of the most beautiful coppers that I've ever seen. I knew it was going to be more of a red-based copper, but we were adding the 746 anyway. Truly, it was absolutely stunning. Had I wanted it a little less red, I just would have done some 834 in my mix, or 734, or added some gold concentrate. So that's just a little trick to remember to do that. And that's only really when a client shows you a picture. If a client comes in and you're doing a consultation and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to take her to a level 7.4, and she hasn't seen what that is, it doesn't really matter, okay? It's going to be slightly warmer than a 7.4, but when they show you that true orange pigment, especially on your 8s and 9s, if you want to get a really beautiful 943, that's when you need to put a bit of 9.3 in with your color, just to make sure that it stops that red. Does that make sense for everybody? Yep, cool. I never thought that it was a disadvantage and that we had to do it, but now I understand why they put that little bit of red in the copper, so our coppers don't look lolly-ish when they come back. I totally get it. And so it's made a world of difference the way I think about it now, which is really good. The other thing I want to talk about is choosing the correct developer to achieve vibrancy in both our red and coppers. So, and then I'll also go over the importance of understanding the underlying pigment when we're doing that, when we're lifting them up. When we are using our red and oranges, when we want that vibrancy to be pushed through, as an example, we have our catalysts, which is, your H-tone, 20 volt, 30 volt, 40 volt. They will say on the bag up to, so H-tone will give you 0 to 1 level of lift, 20 volt will give you 1 to 2, 30 vol will give you 2 to 3 and 40 vol 3 to 4. Now, in any brand, they're always up to that level, and that's depending on the texture of the hair and the density. Okay, so if you've got really thick, coarse hair and you're using 20 vol, you're pretty much only going to get one level of lift if they're like a 4, 5, or a 6 level. If they've got really fine hair and you use 20 vol on a level 7, you're going to get them to a 9, okay, because their hair will lift quicker because it's not as thick. So keep that in mind when you're doing your red and coppers, because if you've got a client coming in and she's a level 5 and she wants to be a 7 and she's got really thick, coarse hair, 20 vol isn't going to cut it. Okay, 20 vol will get you to a level 6 with that client, but it's not going to push you to a level 7. If you don't get to that level 7 and you've used 743 and 734 or just a straight 74, what you're going to end up finding is you're going to sit on a 6.5 level and you're going to have all that undercoat come through, which means your copper is going to be darker and way warmer than what it needs to be. So that's when you would go in and you think, okay, I want my definite 2 levels of lift, so I'm going to use 30 vol. So don't be scared to lift your vol when you're doing your coppers and reds, because you really have to get it to that level to expose that underlying pigment, okay, to expose the brightness of the color. We don't have an orange concentrate in H color. If you've noticed that orange is missing. You can use, if you want to add an orange concentrate, some salons use a little bit of, they'll start off using the gold and add just a drop of the red in it, because obviously red and orange, red and yellow make orange. You obviously don't need as much red. I've done that. The red's very strong and it does overpower the gold. So you need to use a lot of gold. And anyway, you end up mixing way too much product. I find in the H melt drops, the sunny orange is beautiful. Okay. So if you are looking for an orange concentrate in the H melt drops, you only need to use about 5 drops to a 40 gram mix of color of sunny orange, and that's going to work as your orange booster. It's really, really good for that. The Glam Copper Gold will work too, but you've got to use a lot more of it. So I would rather use less of something brighter than a lot of something not brighter for product wastage. So just no more than 5 drops and you'll be fine with that as your copper booster. So same with your reds as well. So when you're doing a red color and once again, there are 5 and you want to go to a 7, use your 30 vol. Okay. Don't be scared to put that on the regrowth area just to give you that lift. So you get the lift and vibrancy in the color. And I only know because I've done it. Okay. I've used them all and it's a beautiful color, but it just doesn't quite have that punch that you need. You've got to go up that vol. Then the other thing you can do is when you're color balancing your client. So for example, just quickly, if they had gray hair, obviously you're not going to use 30 vol. You need to use 20 vol because you need your coverage. Yeah. So when you're looking at the client and obviously her ends might be a little bit faded out, you've got a couple of options what to do there. So traditionally in a lot of colors, they would say you would tint the roots and then you would color balance the ends. So obviously color balance the ends, you're using an acidic color. It has no ammonia in it. With Oway, we don't have ammonia anyway. Okay, so our pH adjuster is only going to open the cuticle so far. Okay, so we use our developers to give us that lift as well. So in our developers, obviously with the hydrogen peroxide is our active agent, that's going to give us our exposure or our pigment develop ability. So when you're looking at the ends of someone's hair and they've come in and you think, okay, well, I'm going to use my regrowth area and I'm going to use 20 vol on that. And then I really, really, really want to really brighten her ends up because she's faded off a little bit, but if anything, she looks a bit flat and she needs that lift and vibrancy. This is where you can get a little bit creative with your developers. So mixing H-tone and 20 vol together is going to give you roughly a 15 vol. Obviously 20 vol and 30 vol together is going to give you a 25 vol, and then you've got your 30 vol. These are the colors these are the developers, that I would color balance with if I'm after intensity. So if you've got a client coming in and you really want to brighten the hair up, don't be scared to lift your vol. It's not going to hurt the hair. What hurts the hair and why they used an acidic color before for color balancing is because you're taking the ammonia out, but we don't have that. So we use our developers to increase our vibrancy when we color balance. it's amazing. The hair feels beautiful. You only need to do it when you want to increase the brightness. So say if they were very faded and you need to actually bring the color back, that's when you would be using your H-tone or your H-tone and your 20 vol mixed together, because you want to deposit with a bit of vibrancy. But if they're coming in and you're doing your roots and they're a 6 and the ends are a flat 6 and you really want them lifted and vibrant, you can go in with 7.6 and 20 vol. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. It gives you that lifting kick that you're after, almost cuts through that flat pigment and develops the color so you get the brightness. So I've color balanced with 30 vol before, 25 vol, 20 and 15 and H-tone. All of it leaves the hair feeling exactly the same way. The longevity of the color is fine, but you're going to compromise your brightness if you don't do it. If you just color balance with 9 vol, what you're doing is you're putting color and it's just going to go boop and sit there. It's going to be nice, but if your color underneath needed that lift and vibrancy, you're not going to get that reflect or that wow or that pop that you're after. So don't be scared to go a little bit higher with your vol when you're color balancing as well. It's totally fine. So when you're, I always think that, like, as a general rule of thumb, if the hair's faded or flat and you're looking for level on level just to brighten, that's when I would always use a 15 vol. Okay. If you want that extra lift and brightness, that's when I would go in with a combination of half 20 and 30 to make a 25, or I would use up to 30 volt, depending on if I needed that lift and brightness. We did a client the other day and we wanted a bit of a red root shadow sort of look, but she was all the one color. So we did the 20 vol on her regrowth area with the 7.6, and then we did 30 vol with 8.66 through the ends, and it was beautiful. Because we were lifting from a 6 to a 7, we still had that, we got the lift, but we had the depth, and then we had it faded out or blended out into a really bright red. Had we just used 8.66 and H-tone or 20 vol or 15 vol, sorry, it wouldn't have been quite enough to give us that vibrancy and that kick. Cool. So my biggest thing is, don't be scared to use a higher vol. Okay, you're not going to damage the hair, but you'll get the results, the brightness that you need. It's not every client that wants bright red anyway. Did you want to ask something, Jackie? Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, with that example you just gave, wise, what was your sort of order?
Can you say that again? You cut out a little bit when you...
No, that's okay. With your application for that example you just gave, what was the order that you applied in?
Okay, because she already had red hair and she had a regrowth, we did regrowth first and then we applied the ends. Say, for example, it was you and you had no color in your hair, then I would do a virgin regrowth application, take it away, and then go back and do my roots. If I was going 2 levels lighter, on the end, you really want that product on there to lift up. And if they were a level 4 and you were going to a 7, I would probably do half 30, half 40 volt together. And use 7.6, and just to make sure you're going to get that lift. It'll lift, but you want the vibrancy to come through. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's all right. Did anyone else have any questions on that one while we're here? No? So the other thing I want to cover is just our underlying pigment. So that's important. Obviously, we know when we're coloring hair full stop, generically, doesn't matter what brand we use. We really need to know what our underlying pigment is with our coppers and reds. And the main reason is that if you are choosing a color, whatever's there is going to denote whether it goes redder or more orange. So an example is lifting from a darker level and wanting a true copper. And you're going from a 6 to an 8, we already know that we've got to add a little bit of gold in there anyway. But if you've got a lot of red sitting in a level 6 anyway, so just be aware that if you did a 7.4 or 7.43 on a level 6, it's going to be a little bit warmer anyway because of the natural red that's already in the hair. And the way to counteract that is not to put base in it, is to put gold in it. Okay, so adding a little bit of gold into your color will stop that more red coming through as well. So doing your 50-50 mix like 834, 843 is beautiful. I really like 744 and gold concentrate together is a really beautiful toner. So say you've done this you've pre-lightened and you want a really bright orange copper, 744 and gold concentrate together is stunning. It's this really bright orange. It's going to be beautiful. So you could even get some swatches and have a little play with that. But that's really, really good. Another example is if you're going lighter, if you're going darker and you're using a red, so say they're a level 7 and you want to put a 7.6 on them, you obviously know that a level 7 doesn't contain any red in it whatsoever. And if you're processing it, say with H-tone, we know that 9-bol is going to give you a level lift on a level 7 because it will, because the hair's that light. And you're going to throw orange, yellow, and then you've put 7.6 on it. When it sits back down, you're going to get a bit of yellowy orange come through as an undercoat for your red. So it might dilute your red a little bit. So what I always do on finer hair when I'm doing my reds is I add a bit of red concentrate to the mix to stop that. And you can also sometimes even add like a dot of blue, because the blue will help counteract the orange and let the red come through. Not a lot, just a little tiny. When I say a dot, I'm like half a centimeter sort of wipe in the bowl. That's a really beautiful trick to learn to do as well. You could add a little bit of base even if you wanted to make sure it came down. Our bases are warm base, so they're not going to counteract too much. But I think just bear in mind that, and I've done it with other brands as well. They've been a level 7 and I've put a red on them and I'm like, why is my red wishy-washy? It's because, maybe you need to go to a 6.6, not a 7.6, and add that little bit of counteracting tone to make sure that the yellow doesn't come through or that orangey doesn't come through in your red as well. Does anyone have any questions about that one? Will that all make sense? Yep. Then we've got our violets too. So our violets are beautiful. They're a true violet. You do need to be aware though, once again, when you're lifting, that obviously if you're putting a 577 on a level 5, you're going to get some red in your violet. The violet pigment, as a pigment base itself, it's not strong enough to counteract red in one go. So what I would do, and what I do in my violets, is if I'm working on darker tones, if I'm putting a 477 on a level 5 or 4 or 3, I know there's going to be a lot of red in that hair. I'll add like a centimeter of my 0.8 blue concentrate in there as well, just to counteract that red coming through. So always bear in mind that what you're working on, obviously if you've pre-lightened the hair or you're going over lighter ends and you're using a 577 or a 677, you pretty much get what's on swatch. But if you're working on level 677 on a level 6, there's going to be orange in there. Okay, so just think that it's not going to be an orange violet. It's still going to be violet, but if you want that real true purple, that's when you just put a little bit of blue in there just to counteract that violet. So obviously 4, 5 and 6 would all be different amounts of blue. I'd put like a centimeter for 4, half a centimeter for 5 and a dash for 6, like a dot for 6, just to counteract it on like a 40-gram mix of color. But I love the violets. They're really, really nice. And it's lucky, a lot of companies don't have even 3 violets on their color chart. If you're wanting to lighten your violet, say you love the 6.6, you think it's beautiful, but you want a color balance and you want a lighter version, you don't want to go as dark as 6.6, you can mix in with 0.0. So half 6.77 and half 0.0 will give you a lighter violet, like a 7.77. So that's a really good thing to remember when you're color balancing. You can mix 0.0 in with your 6 just to get a lighter reflect, so you don't want that heavier color coming through. And then you can still add your violet concentrate as well into it. So if I'm adding my blue concentrate to give me counteraction, I'm also going to add some violet concentrate in it because I'm after that true violet pigment as well. So the same amount of violet, the blue I put in, I always match it with my violet. If not, sometimes a little bit more violet just to make sure with that. So obviously today's not like a massive one. I just wanted to go over the reds. I think not like some salons do a lot of coppers and reds, others do more blondes, they specialize more in your blondes, but you still are going to get a client or a clientele that has a bit of warmth. And I know, Abby, when I'm looking at you guys on Instagram, you do have a lot of coppers coming through and a lot of reds, and they're beautiful and you've really mastered it. But from initially from the start, when you guys swapped over, I was talking and I gave you some mixes to put a bit of gold in there just to make sure that they didn't come out too red. A lot of people know to do that. Some people don't know if they've never used Oway before, but I love the coppers on their own. I think they're really, really nice. But just rule of thumb is if someone shows you a picture and it's more of an orange copper, now you know how to get that without going, oh, I don't really know. You've got your go-to formulas. So even you can if you do a formula and it's beautiful and it's on point, write it down, stick it on the back wall so the other team members can have a look as well or share the information. But I think our reds and coppers are beautiful. Our violets are great. You've just got to remember those simple rules of putting a bit of gold in, just remembering that your double sixes don't necessarily mean it's brighter unless you go lighter. You're still going to get a dark red result because there's more pigment in there. So it's going to be deeper. So always go a little bit lighter when you want it. Your 662 is beautiful for your cooler skin tones, those who want to be red but don't want that to be too flushed in the face. And your violets, use a bit of blue to counteract when you're lifting or going darker. Concentrate. And that's it. Not a very long one. Any questions from anyone or anything? God, I'm explaining it too well then, obviously, for all of you. But it's a really beautiful range. And your mahoganies, I skipped over him because once again, I don't use a lot of mahoganies. But I use the mahoganies more so now when I've got that chocolate client that wants a little bit more warmth. So I would just add a little bit of, and for me to get a true chocolate, I love 5.0 and 5.1 together. Like I think that makes a really beautiful on point chocolate. So if they were wanting a little bit of warmth, I would still do say half 5.1, or maybe I do a third. I do a third 5.0, a third 5.1 and a third 5.5. So you're just adding a little hint of color and you're staying away from your reds. You're just putting in that auburn red, which is really nice. It'll be beautiful. Cool. And that is it, guys. Quick one today. So I'm getting so used to delivering them, I'm getting faster and faster. The next one we know. The next topic we're going to talk about is toning. So I've put out a toning chart for everyone as well, but I'm just going to break down the importance of toning and how we can tone on point there as well. Because when you look at the color chart, a lot of the feedback I got was, what do I tone with? There's not a lot of blondes on there to tone with, but in actual fact, you can make so many colors just by using a bit of a hero 0.0 can dilute so much down for us. So I've tested them all and they're beautiful. The guys last night that was zooming and did their hair, we did a 12-1-7, like a pastel 11-1-7 over the top of her hair, and it was stunning, really, really nice. So we'll be covering that if you're in. Obviously, I'm recording all these and I'm going to put them in OneDrive so I can send out a link, Abby, and those who have other staff in the salon, that if you think, Grant covered an interesting point, you'll be able to access them and they can watch them in their own time as well. So they'll all be in that folder for you. Cool. All right then. So I will head off. Thank you so much, everyone. Good luck those guys back open again. Work hard, earn lots of money. And I will see you all next week. Have a great week.
Thanks.
Thanks, Grant.
Take care. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.